Italian Wine Podcast. Chin Chin with Italian wine people.
Italian Wine Podcast, as Wine2wine 2020 media partner,
is proud to present a series of sessions chosen to highlight key themes and ideas
and recorded during the two-day event
held on November 23rd and 24th, 2020.
Wine2wine 2020 represented the
First ever fully digital edition of the Business to Business Forum. Visit wine2wine.net
and make sure to attend future editions of Wine2wine Business Forum.
Good morning and welcome everybody. Welcome to this session of Wine2wine. This one is titled Akintola Wine Culture in Africa. And before I go into the nitty-gritty of today's discussion, I would like to first give a shout out to the organizers of this event, Wine2wine, Verona Ferry. In times like this, when the world seems isolated, where the fabric of our identity as humans is imbued by the coronavirus pandemic, it's only necessary that initiatives like this that brings a sense of community, of communal living to the world is in the forefront. So thank you very much, Verona Ferry. Thank you very much, Wine2wine. Thank you very much for the Business Forum. Today we would be talking about Akintola wine culture in Africa, and I'm very excited with the guest that we've got here today. I will be introducing you to Mr. Tinashe. Mr. Tinashe is the owner, the director of commercial wines in South Africa. Now, his wines are extremely iconic. I've looked at it, I've seen it myself. He's got a very good distribution in African markets, also in the US and in the Netherlands. He's been able to act the wine culture. When you move from 6,000 bottles to 65,000 bottles, that's a big hack. So we want to hear his experience. We want him to share his experience with us. And let's see if we could learn a few things that could help us to better perform in the African market. Mr. Tinashe, the floor is yours. Please introduce yourself to the audience.
Thank you, Temi, for having me, and thanks for Wine2wine Business Forum for this opportunity to share my own knowledge and experience as well. I'm Tinashe Nyamudoka, founder and director of Commercial Wines. Make my wines in South Africa, but I'm exporting to Zimbabwe, Kenya, the United States, and a bit of the Netherlands. So I'm just going to share a quick background on commercial wines and what I thought it was different to kind of get into it and how I managed to hack into the wine business. So I'm going to be sharing my screen now for a while, so just bear with me. There you go. So this is Kumusha Wines. Kumusha means, it's a Zimbabwean Shona name. It means your home, your roots, or your origin. And I always felt man without a cultural context is lost. And while all individual culture expression is dead. So I started this wine brand in 2017 when I was still working as a sommelier at the Test Kitchen restaurant in Cape Town. And I only had 1,200 bottles to start off with. It was a Chenin Blanc and Semillon blend. I was getting it from Opstal Estate in the Slanghoek in South Africa. I started to have a very cult following the demand. I had an upsurge in Zimbabwe. Then in 2020, I did a whole packaging design. And in 2020 alone, I would have produced, by the end of December, close to 70,000 bottles. So this is a jump from 1,000 bottles in 2017 to 65,000 in a year 3. And my first export to the United States was this year. And I've been doing a lot of business in Zimbabwe with liquor supplies, Netherlands, and in Kenya, like I just mentioned. And what was the reason for the growth? And for me, I think it's part of why I'm in this discussion where I say it's all about hacking the African culture. So I did a rebranding earlier this year. So on the left, you see my old label, which was a depiction of my old grandfather's homestead in Zimbabwe, which is a typical African home. You're going to see a rendezvous. You're going to see I'm talking rural, not in the States. So you're gonna see chickens all around, and I thought this is something we should connect to a more broader African people, especially to the Zimbabwean crowd, because everyone understands what kumusha is, and kumusha is much more epiphanical. It's a way of understanding the person's origins or the person's home. So I felt if I could connect with people in that way, I could really draw them into enjoying wine. And obviously, COVID hit and lockdown. So this really allowed me to get, because I was failing to get into the traditional markets. They didn't understand the story. They didn't understand everything. So with COVID and lockdown, it gave us more access to internet. And I was big on social media. I would get much more orders via social media platforms. I would get much more connections via social media platforms. And my online sales in South Africa grew exponentially. So because people were really getting to know the brand. And obviously, the Black Lives Matter campaign really increased my brand awareness, and it really made the American demand surge. And locally, people are looking for great, authentic, and wonderful wine brands to support. So I want to say Black Lives Matter was an advantage. Like I rightly say, it increased the awareness for my brand, which was a good brand in it as well. So I think 3 of those is probably the reason I can explain to the growth in those 3 years. And this is the range of wines I had, all classic labels, all beautiful, different price ranges, and all telling a different story as well. So 6 in the range I produce now, all sold in America, like I said, and mostly in Zimbabwe. And Zimbabwe. So Zimbabwe is my home. I was born and bred in Zimbabwe, moved down to South Africa in 2008. So Zimbabwe is not a general wine drinking population, but with so much of us being scattered around the world, I think we've picked up this wine culture, and some of us are getting back home. So there's an increase of expatriates going back home to settle home. And since they have enjoyed wine, they're appreciating wine much more better. And with the social media, Instagrams, and the food culture improving, there is quite a surge of wine consumption in Zimbabwe. I can't really pinpoint the number of in statistics and figures. You see Zimbabwe, it's a very difficult country at the moment. So most of the stuff is happening informally. And I think the question which people ask is, can we get our money if we're exporting to Zimbabwe? Well, yes, I'm getting money because most of these companies have set up foreign accounts outside. So payment can be easy if you can deliver the product. So big wine companies in Zimbabwe, probably Stables Winery, Big Five Wineries, Drop Imports, the one I worked with, Victoria Falls Liquorama, mostly in the northern part of Zimbabwe, the tourist side. Then you've got Elixir, which is bringing quite a lot of European varietals, especially Italian wines. Prosecco is probably the number one selling wine in Zimbabwe at the moment in terms of sparkling wine. Then, like I said, there's informal players. They call them runners. So these people would buy stuff in Johannesburg, put on a truck. So there are really a lot of small players, but if you combine them in one basket, you'd find that they're probably supplying half of the liquor industry in Zimbabwe at the moment. So that's Zimbabwe in a brief. There's really a growing demand of wine. I'm doing probably at the moment, Zimbabwe is the second largest importer of my wine by volume and value as well. So I can safely say I'm getting paid, and there is a growing demand for wines in Zimbabwe. Mostly in the black middle class and ex-expatriates. On the traditional white drinkers were white people in Zimbabwe, but mostly because it was relatively easy to travel to Mozambique for holidays, they tend to drink quite a lot of Portuguese wines. And these Portuguese wines most probably are coming through the runners, through the border town of Mutare, but there is quite a demand of those. Castle Garcia, Mateo Rosé is really doing fantastic in Zimbabwe as well. So like I said, for me, hacking the culture was speaking wine in an African way. I always felt the wine language was so Eurocentric. I struggled also grasping the whole concept of blackberries, blackcurrants, when I had never even tasted a blackcurrant. So I felt there was need for wine communication which spoke in an African way. and also that we needed to drink wines in our own spaces, in our own cultural way. Like I said, our background doesn't come on a formal dining restaurants per se, but we as Africans like to get together. We love to drink wines formally. We want to drink in groups, and I felt no one was marketing wines for that in our own way. So I got around with friends and other creatives who would really put that setup I wanted. And the picture you're finding is a good friend of mine who does events in Limpopo. She got all her friends from different tribes in South Africa, and they're enjoying Kumusha wine, and they actually requested wine. And when these pictures show, everyone felt comfortable in drinking their own wine. And another aspect, which is really big all over Africa, is we always have white weddings, but there's definitely have to be a traditional wedding where people wear African attire and people wear, it's more closed family. The exchange of money, lobola we call it, rora we call it. So I felt, and I was getting quite a lot of requests when people wanted to do an African traditional thing, but they couldn't find the wine which spoke in their Africanness way. So one of my biggest drinkers of wine and takers of wine are, Africans doing their traditional weddings, be it in Ghana, be it in Nigeria, Zimbabwe, South Africa. And that's just a classic example of how you can fit in with your brands in terms of speaking the right language and knowing the culture per se. And this is quite something I did recently on my previous trip to Zimbabwe, honoring our local vegetables and honoring the different methods of cooking. Here I was cooking in a clay pot. I'm going to play it for a while. So this really, when I really posted it out on my social media, the amount of engagement I got with people missing home, people missing their grandparents, people missing their roots, and actually tasting the food from the clay pot. So it really connected with brand Kumusha, and I think that's hacking the African culture, speak their language with something we're used to, something we formerly used to. And I think it goes on to say that the African culture is just more than about wine. So I was on the same trip. I went to a coffee plantation where my grandmother grows coffee, and it's the same way. So again, it's touching to the Africanness in us, talking our language, but still incorporating the modern world to really capture and captivate the audience. So this is what I've been trying to do. And then on top of that, I've started describing my wines with flavors I grew up used to in Zimbabwe, where I almost equate them to the traditional European fruits and aromas, so that I can get connection to my customer base. It's like wild loquat, comparing to some apricots. I've got some wild hute, blackberry. So this has allowed me to really interact and make the African culture, them to drink wine without being worried about being wrong with not picking strawberries and all. So yeah, basically that's how I've been hacking the culture with Kumusha wine. And yeah, it's been working well. Like I say, it's trusted because I'm really getting the sales, and in the next year probably going to be tripling production, and it's the same lineup even wherever you go. I spoke of Zimbabwe, but Africa is just one in terms of culture and experiences as well.
Mr. Tinashe, thank you extremely well. I picked up a few points from your presentation now. The story. How would you advise European wineries to communicate their wines in going into Africa? Because I think that one of the things from the way you've acted the culture is to re-represent the wines to people in a way that they would best understand.
Yeah.
I think that's a bit lacking from where we sit as European wineries. How do you explain this to them? What's your advice to them to better communicate to the African people?
The best communication is not to treat wine as a product when you're selling to these people. You know, I felt most of the wineries are selling wine and they're not selling an experience. You know,
interesting.
whatever they're selling in other markets, there's a food component to it, there's an experience to it, but whenever it comes to Africa, it's just, guys, people drink wine and expect to find this. So I think that the best way is to sell the experience. You can sell the Italian experience, cooking pasta, but sell it as an experience, how you can incorporate, you know, African flavors in the Italian cooking. Thereby you're connecting, and you're just not selling a product what's just in the bottle. So I think the best way is to sell experience and try to connect with African experiences.
Thank you so much. That's so perfect. You from the labels of your wines, I see that they are all classic labels. You've not got anything funky, anything too youthful, you don't have this, because in Italy now we see a lot of bottles that are painted, coated bottles and all that.
Yeah.
And are you saying that those kind of styling does not work in Africa, or does not necessarily work, or this is just your own way of communicating to the people?
Yeah, to be honest, I don't think it works, because it's another cultural thing. How many did you grow up with a painting in my house? I never grew up into painting. I love paintings, I love art, but I can't really connect and interpret with it. So I don't think that will work. As African, I think the simpler and the more clearer and the more classic the label is and easy to understand, the better.
Interesting. Before we go to we have some questions on the chat, but before we go into that, just want to ask a few more questions so that we'll be clear on this. Now, if you leave South Africa and go a little bit up to the east, to the west, actually, you're in Namibia.
Yeah.
Now, that's a former German colony.
Yeah.
A different language, a different people. If you go up to the east, you're in Mozambique.
Yes.
That's Portuguese.
Yes.
And then you're coming from South Africa, which is originally English. If you go farther away onto the oceans, you're in Madagascar, and that's French. Now, these various backgrounds and orientations, does this apply also in the way we present the wines to the market? Is this a factor?
Yeah, like at the end of the day, you know, every wine has its origins, you know. Wine of origin Italy, Veneto, wine of origin South Africa. And wine has to honor that. But I think when it comes to selling, try to make the origin be of the place where the wine is going, or the place where the wine is going to be sold. That's what I found easy for me. So in doing so, you don't have to worry about the difference in languages, difference in cultures. Once you know the origin, where you're going, it makes it easy for you to tell the story because you understand. So it goes back to me, not just dumping wine and selling wine as a product. Otherwise, you won't make the connection. So for me, I think let's find the other origin of where the wine is being consumed and what that experiences that wine does to them. So language and culture then doesn't become a barrier because everyone wants to drink good wine. And if you have good wine, that's what you want.
Thank you very much. Finally, what's your biggest challenge in the business? What's your biggest challenge in the market in Africa?
The biggest challenge in Africa has been moving the product. It's quite like I've got a container going into Kenya now, which is stuck, and my importer had to air freight it. So it's quite difficult, the logistics and some cost involved. But I think if you work with a seasoned importer and distributor, it's all smooth and plain. When I started in Zimbabwe, it was quite difficult, but my new importer, very smooth. And my new importer in Kenya is very smooth as well. But I just think the challenge is getting the products from A to B.
From point A to B. Thank you very much, Mr. Tinashe. It's been fantastic talking to you. Now we'll go to the chat. I'll read out the questions and we'll try as much as possible to give answers to the questions that we have. My first question is from Alexis. He says, what are the most important markets / countries in Africa? And what's the turnover in terms of volume and value? Your most important markets, I would like to share a few words on this. Bob, you go first, sir.
I think the most important for me has been Zimbabwe.
And
Like
is that because you are Zimbabwean and you understand the market best, or because it's just a trying market for wines?
I think, to be honest, it was just pretty much from a clean slate. That didn't help me much, but I think because of the brand and the story, it's quite picking up very well. My second biggest coming up very quickly is Kenya as well. Like I say, I'm a very small brand at the moment, but in terms of commercial wines, I think in the last 3 months, I've turned over 12,000 bottles alone in Zimbabwe, which is almost close to in rand terms 300,000 rands. And this is just the space of 3 months. I've got another pending order coming through, and same as Kenya. So, and South Africa, another big one, but obviously as a big country, I'm still not into the value chain in terms of retail and distribution.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Just to add a few words to that, as you know, Timmy works with Zonin, and I'm also responsible for the wine sales into Africa. So the biggest market for Italian wines going into Africa right now, South Africa still remains number one, followed by Nigeria. And then you've got runners like Kenya and Ghana doing very well as well. So, but your top 5 markets would be South Africa, Nigeria, Kenya, Cote d'Ivoire, and I think the 5th one would be you struggling with Ghana there. So that's the biggest 5 markets for Italian wines going into Africa. In terms of turnover, in terms of volume and value, I like to stick with value. Turnover for value for Italian wines going into Africa right now, if I look at the full picture, Italian wines should be about $60 million going into the whole continent. No, the wine portfolio going into the continent should be about that. For the Italian categories, you're down with about $5 to $6 million going into Africa right now. Another question we've got is, so people want to know, which country do you start your distribution of your wines from? And is language a barrier for Italian wine producers?
Well, so I started the first was Zimbabwe, obviously. Then now Kenya, I'm going into Rwanda. And I don't think language is not a barrier at all. Africa, most probably people speak English and they might interpret Italian as well. But I say, and I'll repeat again, language and either way is not a barrier as long as you can communicate well and try to create experiences and understand the African culture.
Interesting. Well, from where I sit, and it's actually been a barrier to Italian producers. For example, most of the labels of our wines are in Italian. And then if you want to export to countries like Kenya, like Cameroon, Kenya would mandate you, SGS would mandate you to have that label translated into English.
Yeah,
and then you must have a sticker saying that alcohol is prohibited for people under 18 and all that behind it. So the Italian classic labeling does not really work in many markets. Cameroon would have it translated into French. If you want to export to Nigeria, you have to do NAFDAC, and that would need you to translate that also into English. So language is quite a barrier. In starting your distribution, my advice is for you to identify the top markets that you are willing to invest in, and then start from there. There are markets that I call nodal markets. The market that hold nodes in different parts of Africa. For example, Nigeria is the nodal market to West Africa. Kenya is nodal to East Africa, and South Africa to Southern Africa. If you can start your distribution, if you're willing to go through the hurdle and start your distribution from these nodal markets, it's easy to expand into other markets from there. Yeah. And as Minister Tinashe had rightly pointed out before, logistics is a big problem. But if you've got distribution in South Africa, it's easy for you to get the wines into Zimbabwe, into
exactly.
Namibia, into Mozambique, into Zambia, into Zimbabwe. So that's basically our response to that. The third question is, what is the role of SOMs? And I'd like Mr. Tinashe to answer this.
So I think
development?
Yeah, so in general in Africa, I think that the profession is still in its infancy. Like I've been in South Africa, and probably the bulk of the sommeliers on the African continent are based in South Africa. So are the top restaurants in the African continent as well. But I think now we've just recently adopted Zimbabwe into the Association Sommelier of International. So the SOM culture is increasing, and whilst it's increasing, obviously the knowledge will increase as well. So in South Africa, the profession is really, really strong and is going stronger, and it's got much more dividends in terms of the wines produced. But the rest of Africa, we're trying to get it into Zimbabwe, but Mauritius, they've got an association, and Kenya is another gateway where a lot of our WSET courses are there. And I see the question, which was answer it as well. So WSET is making inroads in South Africa and Africa as a general. I think it's the standard form of qualification you can get. But in South Africa, because it's much more advanced in terms of restaurants and wines, there's Cape Wine Academy, and there's a sommelier academy. So there's quite a lot. But I think WSET is much more internationally recognized.
Okay, to add a little to that, away from the role of SOMs, I think that one winery that has really done very well, a foreign winery that has really done very well in Africa is CYT, Conchai Toro. And what Conchai Toro did was not to use SOMs, but to use brand ambassadors. So what they did was, to every nodal market in Africa, they send a representative of the winery to act as brand ambassadors there. So currently in Africa, I think they've got about 6 brand ambassadors. They've got one in Nigeria, one in Ghana, someone in Kenya, someone in Southern Africa. And then these guys play the role, most of them are sommeliers as well. So they play the role of introducing the wines to the people and trying to get the wines, explain the wines in a way that merges with the culture of the people. And I think this is something that Italian wineries should also look at, establishing brand ambassadors also on the African continent. Because Italian wines are quite a bit difficult to explain because we've got many denominations, we've got many grape varieties. It's quite a bit technical. Every region has its own wines, and then you're an expert on the wines of the regions that you deal in. So in order to get more experience, as Mr. Tinashe had said earlier, to get more wine experience with the people, it's easier to have these wine ambassadors that visit the market and then explain the wines to people, find a way to blend it with the culture of the people, and then the people would appreciate it more. That's just more. Yeah. Question 4, which you've practically answered, but I'll read it. What is the wine education like in Africa? Is WSET a thing, or is just something similar locally? Mr. Tinashe had said it. WSET is still the thing, also in Africa. Some parts have got their own regional thing, like South Africa with the Cape Wine Academy, Kenya with the Kenyan Sommelier Association and all that. So regionally, you've got some things, and I think Cameroon also has got something linked with France, but then it's just focused on French wine. It's like a French wine academy thing. So I think that's Mr. Tinashe, you want to add something to that, or should we go to the 5th question?
Yeah, I think you've answered it all.
Okay, so the 5th question says, and that's to follow up on the first question by Alexis, what are the most important wine e-commerce markets in Africa? And the knowledge of the wine consumer per geography. This is from Joseph. So, Mr. Tinashe, please.
Yeah, I think, e-commerce in Africa in general is still very, very slow. But I think markets like South Africa are picking up well. I've recently started a e-commerce startup called Someone Call, which is in the last month and is really doing well. And I would really believe in countries like Kenya. It will really grow up as well. Most probably Ghana, because they're a bit much more tech advanced, and Rwanda as well. But to say they're important wine e-commerce, I think e-commerce in general in Africa is still in its infancy. But top of my head, I'll say South Africa, followed by Kenya, and maybe a bit of Ghana and Rwanda.
Thank you very much, sir.
The knowledge of wine consumers per geography. It depends. Most African know what they want and what they want to taste in the wine. But in terms of understanding the wines in general, I think South Africa is a bit ahead. Zimbabwe is catching up. Again, Kenya, Ghana, and probably Rwanda.
Okay. We will move fast because of time. But for the question Mr. Tinashe just answered now, one of the biggest e-commerce chains in Africa for last year and early this year was Jumia.
Yeah.
Now, Jumia's got a very big wine portfolio, but recently also they're struggling. That we can attribute that to COVID. You can attribute that to how difficult it is to buy wines online and all that stuff. They do beyond wines. But yes, the biggest e-commerce market for Africa as of date remains Kenya and South Africa. Those are the big players. Wine knowledge for geography, South Africa leads the pack. Kenya has got a very big Italian residency. A lot of Italians are in Kenya. And because of that, Kenya has also got a very good wine knowledge. The French-speaking markets have very good wine knowledge because they come from that French origin, that French antecedent. So your markets like Cameroon, Cote d'Ivoire are very big on French wines, and so they've got that also. Question 6 says, are there any resources that could help those of us educating about wine learn more about the African wine culture to guide us and give us more understanding? That's from Rebecca.
Yeah, I don't think there is any resources. Very grateful that Africans weren't documenting, but I think the easiest way you can do is if you're going in a country, at least try to find out the local fruits they eat, the local spices they eat, the local food they eat. Then you can always tailor-made your communication against that. And in the local cultures, I think it's stuff you can really Google and find around. But I think the most important is the local fruits and spices and herbs and plants that you can relate and that they understand a bit much more better. And I'll just jump on to question number 7 before the time goes out, which is the factors influencing the purchase of Italian wines. I think in South Africa, it's probably Prosecco to influence. But I think if you can really build up on the success of Prosecco and why people think it's light and delicious, I think Italian wines can really build on that. But I also, in Africa, price really matters. So, the more affordable, the more easy it is. But I think just banging on Prosecco and building from there. In South Africa, it's quite different because people are purchasing in terms of they're much more knowledgeable and there's easy access of a variety of Italian wines as well.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tinashe. I'd just like to add something to that. I think that one of the biggest mistakes I see on the shelf, because every time I go into a new country in Africa, the first place I go to is the supermarkets. And then before I go to the restaurants and the hotel, just to look at what the shelf is like for the wine assortment. The biggest mistake that Italian producers make in Africa is they're not aware of self. Self-awareness is very key in this business. Understand what you're good at. Understand what the business is. Then stick to that. I see a lot of Italian producers trying to produce something that looks French because they've been to Cote d'Ivoire and said that French wine sell. But it doesn't work that way. Italian producers try to produce something that looks South African. It doesn't work that way. People love Italy. People expect that products that come from Italy have this authentic originality. Italian producers need to stick to that. If you're a Valpolicella producer, produce Valpolicella wines. If you make Prosecco, as Mr. Tinashe said, just stick to Prosecco. And don't try to make something MCC sounding, then it's now Prosecco, then it's now this. It's all a mess. And price, yes. But we need to understand that if you look at the market as a cheap market, there is no way we would ever play in that market because we cannot compete with the Spanish producers. You cannot compete with the South African producers that have got SADC and have paid low taxes on their wines. You just need to be aware of what you have and find how best to reach out to the people. Communication is very key in this business, especially with the African people. Thank you very much, Tinashe. We would conclude now. Just to recap on what we've discussed about, we said one of the points that we need to know as Italian producers is to communicate, how best to communicate with the people. How do you project the wines before the people? How best do you share an experience with the people? Convey an experience, not just a product. Don't throw a product before them. Try to convey an experience. Try to tell your stories in ways that relate to the people. Your labels are very important. Classic label still works. Let's not try to push this funky looking things. Africans expect that wines coming from Europe are wines coming from Europe. They look classy. And then they respect that and they're willing to pay for that. Prosecco still leads the Italian wine pack. if you want to get into the market and you're a Prosecco producer, push that forward, please. All right. So at this point, we close. Thank you very much. It's been fantastic having you, Mr. Tinashe. It's been fantastic having your question to the audience also. From me, it's goodbye. Mr. Tinashe?
Thank you so much for having me. All the best with the rest of the sessions.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Listen to the Italian Wine Podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We're on SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, Himalaya FM, and more. Don't forget to subscribe and rate the show. If you enjoy listening, please consider donating through ItalianWinePodcast.com. Any amount helps cover equipment, production, and publication costs. Until next time, chin chin.